Good morning and welcome to the North Slope Borough Community Health Hour. My name is Olivia Kim, Health Educator for the Prevention Unit. This show is brought to you by the North Slope Borough Health Department. Today's episode is part 3 of men's mental health. We originally had planned for 2 episodes, but got some really great interviews and decided to extend the series. We hope that the stories we share with you today will help illustrate that speaking up about mental health can be a strength. Today, we'll be sharing an interview with Curt Pollack. Curt is the Clinical Supervisor for Integrated Behavioral Health here at the Health Department. He'll share a bit about his own experiences and some resources that are available for men on the slope. And with that, we'll get started. So today I'm here with Curt Pollack. We're going to talk a little bit about men's mental health. Curt, can you please tell us a little about who you are, what you do here at the North Slope Borough, and how you got here to Borough?
Yeah, so my name is Curt Pollack. I'm with Integrated Behavioral Health with the Health Department. I'm the Acting Deputy Director of Behavioral Health and the Clinical Supervisor. I came on as the Clinical Supervisor about 1.5 years ago. So I split my time. My home is in Anchorage. I split my time between Anchorage and Borough. I'm up here about half the time, half the year. So I'm sort of back and forth, working in Anchorage when I'm home and working here when I'm here. I ended up in Borough. I was looking for an opportunity to do something hard. And I wanted the freedom to sort of experiment with, I wanted to rebuild something. And I wanted to have the freedom to kind of run with some of my ideas about how to rebuild something. And this seemed like the perfect place. IBH has been struggling for a long time for a variety of reasons. And Josh Stein, who hired me at the time, said, if you want hard, this is hard. So, and that appealed to me. And he said, and I'm not going to micromanage you. And that appealed to me because I've been in a lot of positions where that's what happened and I didn't like it.
Yeah.
So it seemed like I had the opportunity to really kind of run with things, and that was very appealing. So here I am, and Josh was right. This has been really hard. I think it's probably the hardest thing I've ever done professionally, but it's also probably one of the most meaningful things I've ever done. So I'm just really thrilled to be here, and I appreciate the opportunity to have a conversation with you, Olivia.
Yeah, I'm really excited to hear what you have to say about mental health in general, and we're here talking about men's mental health because June was Men's Mental Health Month, and we're dedicating 2 episodes to it because we feel like it's such an important topic.
Yeah.
Right? I think it's difficult for men to ask for help sometimes, even though there are men who are struggling, right? And so with that, we'll get into the questions. So the first question, how has your understanding of mental health changed over time?
I started out my career as a United Methodist clergyman, and for a lot of reasons, I ended up sort of migrating into mental health, which seemed like kind of a natural transition given my curiosity about human behavior. And so I don't know, I started in mental health, 1995. Been doing this a while. And in 2010, I decided to visit 2 couples who were running a therapeutic boarding school in northwestern Montana. I was working in residential care at the time, I'd worked in residential care off and on, and I had this idea about starting my own thing. And I'd heard, from educational consultants about this therapeutic boarding school in Montana that was like the flagship of the American fleet. It was like this fantastic program. Well, I was curious what made it so good.
Yeah.
So I called the owners and I said, I want to come spend a week with you if you'll let me, and kind of find out what the magic is. And so one of the owners, John McKinnon, who's a psychiatrist, said, well, you can come, happy to have you, but I want you to read 2 books before you come. And one book is one I just published on my take on the adolescent problem. And he said, there's another book by a guy out of Harvard, Bob Keegan, and the book's called Evolving Self. He said, you need to read those 2 books, and if you'll do that, come and spend a week with us.
Yeah.
So I bought the books and I read the books. And I actually read The Evolving Self like 2 times because it was so dense that it took me a couple times to kind of get through it.
Mm-hmm.
And one thing led to another, and I found so I went and visited the treatment center and had a pretty cool experience with those folks. And I was, but that book, I kept coming back to that book I'd read by Robert Keegan. It's a book on human development.
Mm-hmm.
And I'd really never read anything on human development, a little bit in school, but not much. Well, one thing led to another, and I found myself in a PhD program at the University of Victoria in Canada.
Mm-hmm.
And I was studying with a guy, Nevin Harper, who was a protege of Keith Russell, who's like the wilderness therapy guy, academic in the United States, and Nevin was sort of his counterpart in Canada. So anyway, one thing led to another. I did this research study with Outward Bound, and I studied the wilderness experience through the lens of Robert Keegan's constructive developmental theory. The reason I'm talking about this is, so I've been a student of Bob Keegan's constructive developmental theory for, 15 years?
Mm-hmm.
And it has radically changed the lens through which I see human performance and human psychopathology.
Yeah.
Because I think what I realize is that a lot of us are doing the very best we can,
Mm-hmm.
even if our life doesn't really look like it.
Yeah.
And the resistance to change is a very real thing.
Yeah.
And there are all sorts of reasons why change is so damn hard.
Yeah.
Because, working at IBH, we have folks who have been through residential treatment for substance use disorders 8, 9, 10, 12 times.
Mm-hmm.
And it's really easy to fall into the trap of, writing them off as a lost cause.
Yeah.
And expecting them to do things that they just can't do.
Yeah.
And I think this sort of theory of human development provided some empathy that I lacked,
Mm-hmm.
because it helped me understand why it is so hard for many of us to make the changes that we know we need to make and ought to make,
Yeah.
but find ourselves struggling year after year after year, repeating the same kinds of patterns of behavior that we've been, engaged in for a long, long time. So your first question, how has your understanding of mental health changed over time? I think I've developed more empathy for myself and others who struggle with meaningful change.
Yeah.
Because I think there are a lot of very understandable and maybe good reasons why change is hard. And I think if you don't understand the things that hold people back,
Yeah.
if we don't understand the things that get in our way of meaningful change, we end up finding ourselves expecting things of people that they're just not capable of doing,
Yeah.
unless they unlock sort of that, an understanding of what's getting in their way and they start addressing the barrier. So I guess for me, that's been probably the watershed and the biggest change. And it's helped me feel more empathetic or have more empathy for people who just keep making the same mistakes over and over and over again.
Yeah.
And, same way, there's things I keep doing and I'm like, what in the world is that about? And so I think that's probably been the biggest change in my view of mental health, is that there are patterns of behavior that are pretty entrenched, and you have to get underneath that if you're going to help people change behavior. Because there are, I think, a lot of things we do to try to change behavior, and they just don't work.
Yeah.
So I'd say that's probably one of the biggest changes to my own perspective over time.
Yeah. And it's reminds me where it's you can try to change all you want, but it's if you don't get down to that root cause, it's never going to
And the things that keep us stuck
Yeah.
in patterns of behavior, even though
Yeah.
we know that those things are destructive.
Yeah.
If you don't get underneath the root cause, it's unlikely that things are going to be any different next year than they were this year.
Yeah. Could you maybe speak a little bit on maybe some of the things that do make it so difficult for people to change?
Yeah, so I think, when we grow up, a lot of us have experiences that are, even if they don't seem like a big deal, they sort of entrain ways of thinking about ourselves and others and our relationship with others and the world around us that are very powerful. And a lot of those beliefs, get sort of reinforced over time, and especially in those formative years of childhood. And we find that, those patterns of belief often follow us into adulthood,
Yeah.
and they're often unexamined. They're operating under the radar. We're not even aware of those patterns of belief or assumptions that we make about ourselves and others and our relationship with others and ourselves and the world around us. And a lot of those beliefs that we had as kids, the things that we did as kids to help keep us alive, keep us safe, psychologically and physically, may have worked then when we didn't have any power. But when we carry those assumptions and beliefs into adulthood, when we actually do have agency to make our own way, make our own choices, make our own decisions, I think those assumptions and beliefs that sort of underpin behavior that go unexamined can really kind of mess things up. Because we're often operating out of a sense of dread or fear of, well, if I do something different, something terrible is going to happen. Well, that may have been the case as a kid. But as an adult, when you have more agency, it may not be the case anymore, but we act as if it is. And we don't even know that's what's going on because those beliefs are, it's just like, do you think about walking down the stairs? No, you just do it. Because how many steps have you taken in your life? Millions of steps. It's so well rehearsed, you don't think about it, you just do it. Well, our belief system is a lot like that. What we learned as kids, we don't think about those things anymore. We just act them out because they're so entrenched. And so I think there are a lot of things that we grew up feeling afraid of. Rejection, abuse, we may have felt unsafe around certain people, and there were things we did to try to keep ourselves safe. Well, we carry a lot of those patterns of behavior into adulthood, even though the threat may be long gone. And so I think unless or until we can re-examine or examine maybe for the first time the assumptions that drive the behavior that operate largely outside of our awareness, unless or until we start doing that, the behavior patterns will likely continue.
Well, kind of going off of what you're saying, when I think about specifically for women, like as a woman growing up into, I guess as a girl growing up into a woman, right? Some of those core beliefs are associated with like overgiving and caretaking. And those, obviously they're like gender, kind of like based on gender and like expectations of like to be a good girl who takes care of everyone and these types of things, right? So I'm wondering if you could tell us a little bit about what types of beliefs that men might inherit from their childhood.
Sure, and because I think this is the cultural overlay for men and women and the stereotypical expectations that kind of we were saddled with as men and women are very powerful. For example, men who are worthy make a lot of money, and men who don't make a lot of money don't really amount to much or aren't seen as successful. That's pervasive. Money, if you're rich, it means you must be smart and have your act together. It doesn't matter how you got it or who you stepped on or what things you may have done that aren't very savory to get there. But if you have a lot of money, man, you're it. Well, that's a huge, I think, overlay for men. Being self-reliant, not asking for help. Having it together where you don't need anybody else, I think is a huge expectation of men in this culture. There's probably a long list, but I think money, self-reliance, being tough, not having to ask for help or support, not admitting weakness. I think those are enormous pressures on most men that I know, and certainly I've felt that in my life. Tried to distance myself from those expectations, but they're still very hard to get away from.
So I guess going off of that, I will kind of segue into my next question, which is, how do traditional views of masculinity, like being strong or self-reliant, affect men's willingness to seek help? And how can men, what are some tools or something to help them get beyond that?
One of the things that fascinates me about this culture is there is this struggle between the old way and the new way. The Inupiaq way and the Western world that's been imposed. And, I look around and I'm thinking of I'm wondering how difficult it must be to navigate a world that you didn't ask for, that was imposed. I'm a Caucasian man, so I grew up westernized from the day I was born. And I think about how hard it is for me to deal with issues around money, status, job title, being independent, not needing help, being, well, even like financially independent. That's like such a big deal. And I was westernized from the day I was conceived. And I'm thinking, how hard must it be if you're in a position where that wasn't the case? And you're trying to navigate two worlds, not one. And both of them are complicated. I'm thinking the men here have a Herculean task to find a way to integrate those two worlds. I only have to manage one. So I think, like, for men on the slope, I think they have a much harder job than I ever will in terms of the demands on them to be proficient in both worlds and find a way to make both worlds work. I think I can only imagine how, when I see the struggle.
I mean, essentially, it's like you're living with one foot in two different cultures, or like one foot in two different worlds, right? And I think there's probably like a disconnect that comes from trying to make sense or like merge these two identities, find a way to like allow these two identities to kind of work with each other, right? Even if like the core values don't align, right? And I can definitely see that would definitely bring up some internal struggle, identity struggle, like who am I? How do I fit in to the bigger picture? So I think those are all important things.
And and what is my value? And how do I determine my value? Because the new world does not seem to recognize the old world and the value of that old, of the Inupiaq way. And so, the identity crisis, I think, is very real and certainly understandable. And, I mean, it's hard enough living in one world and being a part of one world, much less two.
I think it's an interesting topic, right? Because we do live in, well, for Borough specifically, it's like such a culturally diverse place, right? And you have all these people who are coming from different countries, different cultural backgrounds, trying to adapt to this like new, I guess, like Western way of thinking, Western way of like values and all that stuff. And so, I think it's an interesting topic for sure. And with that, we can segue into our next question. Have you ever felt pressured to hide your emotions or tough it out rather than ask for support?
Well, I'll tell you a recent experience with this. So I was on leave for the month of May, and I took leave to do a mountaineering trip. And I went to Canada's Yukon, flew into Kluane National Park and Preserve to try to climb Mount Logan. And I was the oldest person on the trip. And we were carrying a load between Camp 2 and Camp 3. And I'd been training for 6 months to get ready for this trip. And I was carrying a load between Camp 2 and Camp 3. And I got about halfway there, and I kind of hit the red line. And I was exhausted. And I knew that if I pushed onto Camp 3, we had another, 300 meters to go in elevation gain. I knew that if I pushed onto Camp 3, I probably wouldn't have enough gas in the tank to do the ski descent safely back to Camp 2, because it was a steep ski descent, like 40, 42 degrees, and it was a no-fall zone, lots of crevasses, some avalanche danger, and it was a no-fall zone pretty much on the steep section. And I knew that was going to be pretty hard for me if I continued on. And it was really hard to open my mouth and say, because my guy was in front and I was second on the rope team, and I had two others behind me. It was really, really hard to stop and say, Eliel, I think I need to turn around and go back down. It was really, really hard. My pride, I didn't want to stop. I didn't want to be the guy that couldn't do it. But I knew that if I didn't do that, I was going to put myself and I was going to put others at risk. And that was just selfish and unacceptable. So I turned around, and unfortunately I didn't cache my loads. I carried my load back down, and that meant that I had to go out early, because now I was out of sync and we'd burned most of our weather days. I had to go out early. Talk about humiliating. But it was the right decision. But it was really, really hard. And I have the benefit of age and some maturity. Like, what would I have done if I was 20 years younger?
Yeah.
I don't know that I would have had the courage to make the right decision. And, I may have put people at risk.
Yeah.
So I think asking for help, and as, sophisticated as I think I am, it was really hard. So I'm thinking of folks who may not be as old as I am and haven't had the benefit of time to develop the maturity that I've developed over the years, because it just takes time to do that, to grow up.
Yeah.
And all the training I've had and the work I've done, if it's that hard for me, what about someone who's 21 years old,
Yeah.
who doesn't have much life experience? How hard is it for that person to say, I've hit my limit, I need some help, I can't do this? I think it's really important for men to be able to say, I've hit my limit, I need some help. Will somebody please step in and help me?
Yeah. Yeah.
Because the consequence, if you don't, is there are going to be consequences,
Yeah.
and depending on what the situation is, it could be really bad.
Yeah. Yeah.
You've got an anger problem and you don't address it, and so you end up beating your spouse up or your girlfriend up, or you end up, being arrested and incarcerated, or you end up, becoming alcoholic or addicted to drugs because you've got an anger problem and you're not willing to get help to manage it. I mean, there are all sorts of things that as men we need to address.
Yeah.
But it takes some measure of humility and self-confidence to be able to admit we can't do it all.
Yeah.
And sometimes we all have limits.
Yeah. And I think, just like this idea of asking for help, right? For admitting that you can't make it, that is like something that goes so against kind of like Western values of like, I need to push through no matter what. Like if I give up, if I don't finish, that's a sign of weakness, right? Even as a woman, I feel the pressure of that, right? It's hard for me to ask for help. It's hard for me to admit when I've had enough, right? And it takes courage. It takes humility. It takes a sense of self-awareness.
Yeah.
Also, it takes like a sense of being aware, I guess, of the system and the values that are being put on you as well. But it's not an easy thing, for sure not. Yeah, so.
And I had my own persona, my own sense of myself that, well, of course I can do this. When it came to light that, well, maybe I can't. Not now anyway, at least not today. Sort of in crisis, you're like, but wait a minute, but I can do this. Well, no, actually you can't.
Yeah.
That was hard to swallow. Because I had to realign my sense of self about, well, what can you do? And the whole thing about age, Yeah.
Yeah, it's hard when your sense of self, right, is shaken, because we do carry this self-image, and I think we project it. We have this image of ourselves that we project and we share with the world, right? And I think men specifically have this image of, as we said, being tough, being strong, being self-reliant, being able to figure things out, right? And so maybe when it's like, when you have to admit that I can't do it, I need help, that is like a kind of like shakes that. Yeah. Okay. So with that, we'll segue into the next question. What mental health challenges do men face on the North Slope specifically?
Well, again, we sort of touched on this with the, 1 foot in the old way or the Inupiaq culture. Well, not the old way, but historically it's, thousands of years old.
Yeah.
And 1 foot in the new, I think that creates all sorts of potential problems, opportunities, but also lots of problems with identity. And I think money and the infusion of large sums of money have complicated things because, while money may provide opportunity, it also, I think, really complicates things. This was not a culture based around, exchange of the economic system was very, very different before colonization, and I think it's probably confused, and I see it all around. This sort of materialistic worldview isn't really compatible with the Inupiaq values. But here it is on full display because, there's a lot of money in this town.
Yeah.
And I think the loss of identity, the struggle to create an identity, a sense of meaninglessness and maybe hopelessness that things are really going to be any easier or any different. I see men who are mean to the ones they care the most about.
Mm-hmm.
And it's probably a reflection of anger toward self,
Yeah.
where they don't feel good about themselves.
Yeah.
They don't feel good about their prospects. They don't feel hopeful.
Mm-hmm.
And so they're angry.
Yeah.
And there's rage inside. And so they take it out on the people they care the most about. And it's so destructive. And, or, drinking and drugging to try to check out and become numb to the pain.
Mm-hmm.
Anything's better than the pain.
Yeah.
Obviously, suicide is a huge problem here, even with young people. They just don't see a way out. And a way out's better than, the pain of, the life they live.
Yeah.
So, we see it with suicide, domestic violence, alcoholism, drug addiction, risky behavior. There's a lot of very high-risk behavior going on in this town and across the slope. And, I don't know, boredom, sense of, a lack of meaningful challenge.
Yeah.
So I think it manifests in a variety of ways. And it's not that these things don't happen elsewhere. All these things happen elsewhere. But I think it's the prevalence that is so astonishing up here.
Yeah.
Is the degree to which it happens.
Yeah.
We're not unlike other parts of the country or the world for that matter, but the prevalence is unlike anything I've ever seen.
Yeah.
And, the research that's been done, year after year, decade after decade, prevalence rates are far higher than national averages in the United States, as an example. So, yeah, unfortunately, the manifestation of the identity crisis is, I think, it's pretty dark. And, some of my staff who have been here a while or even a long time, they're not burned out because of workload. I think some of them struggle with burnout because of hopelessness that they can actually make a difference because, the problems are so persistent and so tenacious.
Yeah. I'm sure there's like a level of emotional burnout that comes, right, with kind of encountering those things.
When the people you care about and you've worked for and you've tried to help, keep dying.
Yeah.
And I think it's, there's a risk of just feeling numb and giving up. Yeah, the manifestations of men's challenges, I think, is, we see it every day, and it's just frustrating and agonizing and tragic and disappointing. But at least at IBH, we've got a mayor and an assembly that are, I think, acutely aware of the problems, and they're committed to trying to make things better.
Yeah.
They're putting a lot of money in behavioral health, and we've gone from, I came a year and a half ago, we've gone from a staff of 11 to almost 30.
Oh, wow.
And with that, a lot of growing pains, and there's still a lot of things that need to be improved.
Yeah.
And rebuilding trust with the community is going to take a long time because for years and years and years, IBH was not functioning, and I think people it was kind of the joke of the town. And why would you go to IBH? You fill out an intake packet, they're never going to call you back.
Yeah.
And it's going to take time to change that perception. And but I hope men will give us a shake.
Yeah.
And exercise the courage required to walk in the door and ask for help.
Yeah.
Because we've got some really good folks at IBH who want to help and are capable of helping. And I just hope that men will put their pride aside long enough to walk through the door.
Yeah.
But it's hard.
It is.
It's hard saying I can't do it.
It is.
Alone.
It really is. And, you know, I guess with that, we can segue into the next question, which is what resources are available here at IBH? And just like, if you know of other resources like within Alaska or the North Slope that are available for men in our communities.
Yeah, well, I mean, the short answer is the resources are pretty limited. I mean, we have recently expanded our staff, which means we now have capacity more than we did a year ago to actually work with people individually and in groups. So I do have a number of clinicians and counselors on staff now who can meet with men individually to do coaching, counseling, psychotherapy. Even if all I want to do is a quick check-in, we've got people who can do that.
Yeah.
You know, some men may not feel comfortable doing psychotherapy, but they want to just have a chat.
Yeah.
And we're open to whatever point of entry a man feels comfortable with. We'll meet them where they are, you know. So we do have a much greater capacity now to meet with men individually. We do have a group that meets 3 nights a week. It's a substance use disorder group that men who are struggling with addiction or abuse of alcohol or other drugs, they are welcome to come. One of our counselors, Mark Fallis, is doing some individual work with men who are struggling with domestic violence and issues around anger. And Mark's, you know, he's really good at it. And he's been here about 8 years in this community, serving the community. And, you know, he's got a real heart for that kind of work.
Yeah.
And, you know, it can be difficult, but he's willing to work with men and women who found themselves on the wrong side of the domestic violence equation or the anger equation. So, and then, you know, for young men, we do a grief group during the school year over at the high school. We usually have a counselor or a clinician spending some time at KETA for the young men who are not yet adults. And, you know, we're also trying to roll out a youth development program across the slope that will be not just for men, but for young men and women, adolescent boys and girls. That's going to focus on getting kids outside and teaching them how to ski, building exercise into their daily routine, among other things, and then doing some expeditions with either Knowles or doing expeditions where we're skiing village to village. That's sort of under construction. You know, it's going to take a lot of time and money and resources to get that done, but we're committed to that, to give young men and women an opportunity to do something besides spend 8 or 9 hours a day on their phone, which is happening all too frequently. So there are resources off slope. You know, we have contracts with Lakeside Milam in Washington and Native American Connections in Arizona for substance use treatment, residential. So I think Lakeside Milam's 30 days. NAC or Native American Connections is 45 to 60 days. So if men are struggling with substance use, in addition to the outpatient, we also and there's no charge to members of the community across the slope. We'll pay for their flights down and back as long as they complete treatment, and we pay for the treatment. So substance use treatment is available to men across the slope, and we encourage them to come talk to us about it if that's something they want to address. But there's a lot more to do, and there are a lot of things that we don't offer. Sober living, we don't have that. We don't have detox. I mean, the hospital, we work with a hospital to try to do some detox, but we don't have a formal detox program. Sober living is really important. We don't have it. We're trying to find ways to build out the infrastructure for support. So when people come out of residential treatment, they're coming back to something other than the same old story that they were participating in when they left. You know, in terms of housing and friends and their support network. You know, some of those support networks aren't really in their best interest. Because there are other people who are using actively, and that's pretty hard when you come back into a community that's continuing to use. So, but there's a lot to do to try to improve the support on the slope. But those are some of the things that we do offer. It's not enough, I know that, but you know, we're looking to try to identify the gaps and address those gaps as best we can. And again, you know, we have a current administration that's willing to put money where their mouth is. And that's making a difference. but it's a slow process because we've got to rebuild trust with the community. 'Cause,
Yeah.
you know, trust was lost for many, many years.
You know, and earlier we talked about change, right? And any change takes time, it takes progress, right? But it does sound like you guys are really trying to do some proactive things.
We are. It's not a straight line, though. You
Yeah.
know, we make mistakes, and then we have to course correct, and then we try something else and make mistakes and course correct, and
Yeah.
so it's, you know, kind of 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But overall, I think, you know, things are improving.
Yeah, and you know, any journey, no journey is going to go just straight
No.
up like this, right? No journey.
And
is
certainly
gonna
not
go
this
like that.
one.
Yeah.
You know, this is a complicated culture for reasons we've already talked about. We're remote. I mean, this place is extreme in just about every way,
Yeah.
in beautiful ways and in ugly ways.
Yeah.
It's a place of extremes, extreme beauty, extreme capacity, extreme opportunity. But there's also that underbelly, you know, that's really complicated to address.
Yeah, and I think it's important to be honest about that, right? Because I think sometimes there's a tendency to kind of just like sweep it under the rug.
Oh, yeah.
But I think it's important because it's a part of the reality of where we are. And I know it may be hard for people to hear about it, right? But I do also think that it's important.
You know, I think, and I include myself in this, I think we often we fall into the trap of spending a lot of time managing how people perceive us. And I think that it's just a colossal waste of time.
Yeah.
I would much rather, if I'm trying to hide, you know, my problems so that people think I'm put together better than I actually am.
Yeah.
How much better would it be if I just came out and said, you know what, I've got a problem with this.
Yeah.
Could you help me? Can you help me get better at this thing that I know I need to get better at, rather than trying to manage how you see it, you know, and hide it from you.
Yeah.
Just think if we took that energy that we spend hiding from people and actually spent time asking people to help us get better at that thing.
Yeah.
So my call to men is, have the guts to stand up and say, I need help. I don't have it all together. I don't have all the answers. And there are probably some people out there who can help me be a better man. And we've got some folks, myself included at IBH, that are prepared to do that. I'm trying to figure out a way to be a better man.
Yeah.
You know I need help. And that's, you know, on that trip, I know that I needed to be honest with myself and with others that I can't do it all.
Yeah.
And sometimes I'm not up for the task and I need help.
Yeah. And ultimately, it's like reframing what does strength mean, right? Reframing like our understanding of strength, like what actions, what behaviors encapsulate this idea of strength, right? And just because we've grown up believing that strength means one thing doesn't mean that it always has to mean that.
And reframing failure.
Yeah.
You know, I had the opportunity when I made that decision to turn around between Camp 2 and Camp 3 to define what failure means.
Yeah.
Well, I can look at it as, you know, I'm weak, I'm pathetic, I'm a quitter. I mean, I could go on and on with all the negative ways of making sense of that experience.
Yeah.
Or I can say, I had enough self-awareness and guts to recognize I had reached my limit and it was time to turn around so I didn't hurt myself or somebody else.
Yeah.
And, you know, I'm going to go back and try again next year with a slightly different training regime and maybe with a different mindset about how I deal with my limitations. But I think reframing failure is one thing we can do to maybe take the stigma away from asking for help.
Yeah. You know, I heard a quote, and maybe it's like kind of cliche or stereotypical or whatever, but it was all about like learning to fail well, right? Because no matter what you do in life, you're going to come up against challenges, you're going to come up against blockages, and you're going to face something which you might consider as failure. But if you learn how to kind of move through that, then every time it's going to get easier, and you're always going to be able to move on to the next step and the next step and get to wherever you're supposed to be, right?
You know, I was listening to a TED Talk when I worked in Palmer and I lived in Anchorage. I had that long drive. This guy came on and he was talking about it was a TED Talk, and he was really anxious, so anxious that he had a hard time having difficult conversations with people. And he was in like a leadership role. So he made the decision that he was going to put himself in a position of being told no, where he knew he would be rejected or his request would be rejected. And he was going to like ask 10 people for something, but set himself up where they would say, no, I'm not going to do that for you. And he had this goal of like 10 people, and then he thought that would help him. Well, he did that, and it was the effects were so profound that he kept going, and he set a goal to like have 100 experiences where he was told no, or like he went into a car dealership, and he asked the salesperson if he wanted to buy a car, but he was going to pay half the retail price. Well, of course they're going to say no, but it was like he knew that he had a problem, and he wanted to address it instead of cover it up. He's like, well, maybe if I just hit it head on. Anyway, I'm just thinking we all have things that we need to work on, and all of us. We're all works in progress. I don't care how sophisticated you think you are, how old you are, how mature you are, how together you think you have it. We all are works in progress. And I just hope the men will accept that, recognize it, and say, I need some help with some stuff. And we'd love to see them walk through the door, 5,200.
So what resources are available for the villages?
Yeah, so over the last many, many years, there has been virtually nothing for behavioral health in the villages. There's been medical coverage through Samuel Simmons and ASNA, but there's been virtually no behavioral health for a long time. So when I started traveling to the villages to kind of get a sense of things, people were like, who are you and what are you doing here? I'm with behavioral health. Well, where have you been for the last 10 years? I mean, that was kind of the attitude. Like who are you? What are you doing here? Why should we take this seriously? Because what, flash in the pan? You haven't been here for 10 years, now you show up? Why? It became very clear that there was virtually no trust in IBH or behavioral health on slope in the villages, and that we had an enormous amount of work to do to reestablish some kind of presence and to rebuild trust. And so we've gone from 11 staff to almost 30. I'm in a position now where I almost have enough staff to have some kind of behavioral health presence in each village. I'm one clinician short, but as soon as I hire one more position, I'll have all the villages covered. So Point Hope is being serviced by Manilik, so we won't be in Point Hope unless we're sort of backup. But Kaktovik, Nuiqsut, AKP, depending on how the conversations go with Tanana Chiefs Conference, who've been covering AKP, but probably AKP, Hekasuk, Wainwright, and Point Lay. I'll have clinicians assigned to each village, and they will be doing a regular rotation in the village, probably 3 to 5 days in length, probably every other month, because I've got many of my clinicians on a hybrid schedule where they don't live in Borough full-time. Some do, most don't. And that's what I've had to do to actually recruit clinicians in a very competitive hiring environment. So my anticipation is that every other month, I'll have a clinician in that village, boots on the ground, for 4 to 5 days at a time. And then the folks who seek help through IBH will be assigned to that village clinician. And if there's a tragedy, that clinician will be tapped first to go into the village, because he or she will have the relationship by being boots on the ground and by having most of the caseload from the village. If they're not available, of course, we'll have to send somebody else. But the goal is to have some continuity where the person who's in the village every other month for a week is a person who's managing most of the caseload for folks in that village, and the person who's responding to crises whenever possible. If there's a suicide or a homicide or a death of a member of the community, or some other kind of tragedy, that person can be mobilized, even if they're out of state, to come up and be with the people. So that's a work in progress, but I think we're on the cusp of actually building out a schedule where we can have clinicians in those communities reliably. It's certainly not as much as I wish, but it's a start. The other thing is that we're looking to hire a counselor or a behavioral health aide in each village. Right now we have Amos Nashokpuk in Wainwright, but we're looking at replicating that in each of the villages. So there is a resident behavioral health person in each community. And then the last thing is that youth development program. The idea is that we're going to have identify a teacher with the North Slope Borough School District who has as a part of their portfolio of responsibility the after-school program with young people, and then the behavioral health aide / counselor that will be in each village would be helping them run this after-school youth program where 2 to 3 to 4 days a week, kids are on skis, skiing around the community with the teacher and the behavioral health aide. They're doing cultural activities sort of after school, so they have something to do besides spend time on their phone, because not everyone's a basketball player. You know, not everyone's an athlete, and this provides an alternative activity. And again, the goal is to have that in every community across the slope. And then, you know, we talked about doing some of these village-to-village ski trips, and that would be kids from every village participating in those. And the Knowles expeditions in the summer, again, that would be something that kids from across the village have the opportunity to participate in. You know, the Knowles expedition we did this year was open to kids across the slope. Unfortunately, because our timeline was so short, we weren't able to really do the proper recruiting and marketing for that. So most of the kids ended up coming from Borough, but we really hope with adequate time and the right marketing that we can draw kids from every village. Our goal was actually 2 from each village. And that's still our goal. We just didn't pull it off this time because we were really under a time crunch to get the trip to go at all. So that's sort of some things that we have in mind for the villages. And, you know, we're doing Zoom sessions now. We weren't doing those before, to try to connect people with some kind of visual experience with their provider. So anyway, that's part of what we have in mind for trying to improve our village. Oh, one other thing I failed to mention. Ellie Edway, one of my counselors in Anchorage, she and Amos are actually working with some of the clinicians in Borough to start implementing talking circles. You know, South Central Foundation, I think, has been very successful in doing talking circles with some of their folks across the state. And we're looking at having virtual talking circles where participants from every village are invited, or people from every village are invited to participate. We haven't rolled it out yet, but it's a work in progress. So we'll see. And there's certainly so much more that can be done, but those are some of the things that we're starting with. I mean, when I came, we had one clinician and she was running the program. Well, you can't do it. And we had, 3 counselors and 1 clinician. I mean, it was all we could do to keep the lights on. But we're in a much better spot now.
Good to hear that.
Yeah.
Well, thank you so much for spending time answering these questions, telling us a little about yourself and the resources that are available. Before we finish, is there anything else that you would like to share? Anything else that you would like to add?
So there is one thing I wanted to say that hadn't occurred to me immediately, and it's regarding men's issues, especially as they pertain to men on the slope generally, and it's a disclaimer. So a disclaimer to issues as they pertain to men on the slope generally, and Inupiaq men in particular. I am no expert. I've worked on the slope all of 16 months, so my learning curve remains steep. What I do bring to the table is 64 years of living as a Caucasian man in Canada and the United States, and a large appetite for learning, paying attention, asking questions, observing, and being curious. So to your listeners, please know that my comments are best understood in the context of someone who has some understanding of issues facing men on the North Slope, but that understanding is limited. There is one other thing I wanted to touch on that hadn't occurred to me immediately. You had asked me, Olivia, about resources available to men on the slope who may wish to get help. And I had mentioned to you, the very capable counselors and therapists that we have on staff at IBH who are ready and eager to help. The groups that we run several times each week, the psychiatric team we have that can prescribe helpful medication, and the residential treatment options available to those who wish to sober up and get a handle on an alcohol or drug addiction. And these tools can help. In some cases, they can help a lot. But I would be remiss if I didn't mention one more thing. And it's funny how it escaped me, but it's like one of the most obvious things, and it's the power of mindset. Probably the single most powerful tool any of us have to affect meaningful change is our mind. William James, the famous 19th century American philosopher and psychologist, wrote, "The greatest discovery of my generation is that human beings can alter their lives by altering their mindset." Harnessing the power of the mind is often difficult for some of the reasons I mentioned earlier. History of traumatic experience, which is really effective at sort of rewiring the brain in some rather unhelpful ways. Forms of self-protection from perceived harm or calamity when that harm or calamity is no longer a pressing threat, but the cost of the ongoing self-protection is high. Or ongoing addiction to alcohol, drugs, sex, gambling, or some other form of profound distraction. We certainly can't rewrite history and change things that have happened to us or undo poor decisions we may have made. If we suffered abuse as a kid, we can't unring that bell. If we hurt someone deeply with our anger, the damage to that relationship may be irreparable. But what we can do is change our relationship to those events by changing the way we make sense of those events. Rewriting our story about those experiences can make all the difference. Being honest in our meaning making can help us come to terms with painful events and provide us an off-ramp for destructive forms of behavior. Carl Jung, the late Swiss psychiatrist, put it simply, and with his words, I close. It is not that something different is seen, but that one sees differently. It is as though the spatial act of seeing were changed by a new dimension. Thanks for the opportunity to talk to you and to your listeners, Olivia.
Thank you, Curt, for sharing your story, your time, and your insight. And with that, we'll transition into today's wellness practice. For today's practice, I'll be providing you with a set of reflection questions. You can write these questions down and spend some time reflecting on them when you have time. You can answer the questions in your head. You can answer these questions with someone that you care about, or you can write them down on a piece of paper and just reflect on there. One thing that's come up during all of these interviews is the concept of asking for help. We've seen how challenging it can be, but also how powerful it can be too. When we're facing mental health challenges, it can often feel like we're alone or that our problems would be a burden to someone. But when we find the courage within ourselves to step out of our comfort zone and seek the help that we need, we often find support and compassion from those around us. We learn that we don't have to struggle alone. So with that, the first question is, was there a time in my life when I was struggling with something and asked for help? How did it feel to ask for help, and how did it go? Once again, that question is, was there a time in my life I was struggling with something and asked for help? How did it feel to ask for help, and how did it go? The next question is, what holds me back from asking for help when I need it? Once again, what holds me back from asking for help when I need it? And finally, is there something I need help with in my life right now? And who can I turn to? Whether that's a friend, a family member, or someone else in my community. Once again, is there something I need help with in my life right now? And who can I turn to? Whether that's a friend, a family member, or someone else in my community. If there's anything from this episode that you'd like to learn more about, or if you have any questions in general, please reach out to me by email at olivia.kim@north-slope.org or by phone at 907-852-0344, extension 4116, and we'll air your answer on a future episode. For announcements, we will be in Point Hope for our Community Prevention Coalition meeting and basketball camp in 2 weeks. Times will be announced via Facebook and email. Our Saturday cornhole tournament for men aged 18 and older is ongoing and will continue to be held every Saturday throughout the summer. As mentioned before, this is part of our initiative focused on raising awareness for men's mental health, providing enjoyable, accessible wellness activities, and essential education to promote healthier and longer lives. Thank you so much for tuning into the show. We hope you found it insightful and learned something that can help you on your own health and wellness journey. If you'd like to be a guest on our show or would like to nominate a community member whose story you'd like to hear, please reach out to me as well. Next week, we honor PTSD awareness with integrated behavioral health clinician Michelle Miller. She will be sharing important insights on PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder. Trauma is something that affects all of our lives, and just like today's topic, can be really challenging to speak about. If you or someone you know has been affected by trauma or PTSD, please tune in. Until next time, Koy Nakbak.